Good morning. Welcome to this early morning intelligence explainer for the Stylo News Intelligence Update. I'm your host, and today we're bringing you a strictly factual situation report on the Western Hemisphere for July 24th, 2026. We'll be mapping out the primary patterns of events, key flashpoints, and the overarching impact spanning from the local level all the way to the international stage. Let's get right into the briefing.
Before we dive in, a quick note that today's briefing is brought to you by ProWave AI. They're the developers behind Stylo Intel Ops, an AI-powered open-source intelligence program, as well as Stylo News, which is the commercial version you can find on the web and through their mobile apps.
Here is how we're going to break things down today. We'll systematically review key events by moving geographically. We'll start at the U.S. Mexico border, track our way south through Central American transit corridors, and head into the South American production zones. Then we'll wrap things up with a look at regional threats, public sentiment, and our future forecasts.
Let's start with Section 1, U.S. Southern Border Flashpoints. We are beginning our assessment right at the U.S. southern border. Specifically, we're monitoring the rapidly shifting points of pressure and where the current enforcement gaps lie. Available intelligence reporting anchors our focus across the Southwest, highlighting active transit corridors stretching across Arizona, Texas, and California. As you can see, there's a significant concentration of activity clustered right around key urban and desert choke points.
Let's break down exactly what the data is showing us in these specific sectors. Current indicators point to human traffickers aggressively exploiting temporary enforcement gaps in San Luis, Arizona. Basically, as border patrols reposition, the cartels immediately adapt. Over in Texas, we're seeing the sustained use of a very mature facilitation architecture in the El Paso urban sector. We're talking about covert storm drains, cut barriers, and complex tunnel infrastructure. Meanwhile, the Nogales and Tohono-O'odham Nation corridors in Arizona remain highly active with cartel-enabled movement. And finally, out west in Campo, California, active joint night operations imply that illicit networks are persistently attempting to cross in that specific sector.
Moving on to Section 2, Central America Transit Corridors.
Moving south from the U.S. border, we have to look at the Central American transit corridors. These are the crucial logistical arteries that facilitate illicit flows northward, right toward the U.S. homeland. Intelligence data reveals a heavy concentration of trafficking nodes sitting right along the Guatemala-Honduras border, as well as transit spaces cutting straight through Nicaragua. These areas really represent the critical links between production and final distribution.
A crucial theme we're seeing from recent reporting is adaptation. Intelligence indicates the Sinaloa cartel is actively establishing a brand new overland corridor along the Guatemala-Honduras border. This shows a strategic shift. They are moving away from relying strictly on maritime routes and pushing deeper into remote land infrastructure. That being said, maritime routes are still highly active. Guanaja, located in the Bay Islands of Honduras, operates as a critical maritime transshipment hub for go-fast vessels. To put the scale of this maritime threat into perspective, a massive interdiction recently took place 142 miles south of Costa Rica. Authorities seized over 7,000 pounds of marijuana and 175 kilograms of cocaine. Further south, Nicaragua is increasingly being assessed as a highly permissive transit environment. Its political isolation and authoritarian control obscure visibility, which essentially creates a covert logistical sanctuary for these networks.
Next up is Section 3. South America Production Zones.
Tracing these threat vectors all the way back to their origin, we turn our focus to the production zones and export nodes down in South America. Isolating the core production and export regions, intelligence shows that the most critical infrastructure for these cartels is primarily situated along the northern and western coasts of the continent, specifically those facing the Caribbean Sea and the Pacific Ocean.
Let's look at the country-level data. The intelligence confirms that Colombia undeniably remains the principal production base. This is clearly evidenced by recent military operations in Nariño that successfully destroyed a major cocaine hydrochloride lab. Right next door, Ecuador serves as a highly volatile logistics and export hub. It's currently experiencing severe urban violence, particularly assassinations in coastal cities like Manta and Guayaquil, which are heavily linked to organizations like Los Choneros. Meanwhile, Venezuela continues to function as a permissive transit zone facilitated by the Cartel de los Soles. And finally, Peru and Bolivia represent secondary but still vital concerns. They're particularly utilizing infrastructure like the port of Chanchay and operating within the politically complex Chapare region.
Section 4, Threat and Sentiment Analysis.
Having established the geographic ground truth across those three regions, we are now shifting our lens to an overarching threat assessment, along with an impartial analysis of regional public sentiment. First, let's look at the physical threat profile. The overall threat to official U.S. personnel and interests in Latin America currently remains moderate. Right now, there are no confirmed direct threats or planned attacks against U.S. embassies, military units, or official facilities. However, the risk profile elevates significantly for any personnel operating within those contested, localized transit zones we discussed. This elevated risk is notably underscored by recent, though unconfirmed, reporting of 2 American citizens murdered in Honduras, potentially linked to cartel activity in those specific trafficking hubs.
To really understand the public landscape, we turn to open-source sentiment analysis. The intelligence snapshot from social media platforms, including X, indicates a consistent regional skepticism regarding U.S. security actions. The observed sentiment frequently frames these international anti-narcotics operations as politically motivated and ultimately ineffective at curbing the systemic flow of drugs. This represents a narrative environment that can definitely constrain partner-government cooperation.
Building on that sentiment, the prevailing public narrative asserts a theme of endless adaptation. Observers and local populations express that cartels easily adapt to enforcement operations. Because of this, military and police actions often just result in the displacement of criminal activity. It simply pushes them into new corridors or hidden urban tunnels, rather than achieving any real, sustained suppression.
And finally, Section 5, Forecast and Podcast Alert.
Concluding this morning's Intelligence Explainer, we want to forecast near-term developments you should watch out for. Based strictly on the data and patterns we've reviewed today, observers should watch for the following likely events. Up at the U.S. southern border, expect continued cartel exploitation of urban tunnels and an immediate capitalization on any shifting enforcement gaps. Down in Central America, watch for route diversification. As maritime interdictions increase, cartels will absolutely push further into remote overland corridors. And finally, in South America, anticipate the continued volatile convergence of narcotics trafficking with local political instability.
Now, this briefing serves as a short lead-in to a much broader discussion. For a comprehensive, in-depth analysis of the last 2 weeks of events across this region, we highly encourage you to follow the link on this post to listen to the full Stylo News Intel Update podcast. It's available on your favorite podcast channel. And to stay consistently informed, you can subscribe to Stylo News for AI-powered news on demand by visiting stylonews.com.
Thank you for joining us for this intelligence briefing this morning. We want to leave you with this final, critical question to consider. As regional and international enforcement operations inevitably escalate, where will these highly adaptable, well-funded illicit networks establish their next geographic sanctuary? Until next time, stay informed.